Hi, everyone. Welcome to SoDA Series Live. I'm Kristen Bell on the Strategic Development team here at Adobe. And I have the privilege of working with SoDA, the Society of Digital Agencies, and their amazing member organizations, one of whom you're going to hear from today. SoDA Series Live is just one of the collaborations that we do. And here we bring you candid discussions with some of the world's most progressive and kind of renowned digital agencies from all around the world. And through these discussions with these agency founders and creative leaders, we want to provide you, our creative community, the opportunity to learn from their personal as well as professional experiences. And maybe you'll have some little nuggets or takeaways to help you along your own personal or professional creative journey. So we're super happy that you're here with us today. Thanks so much for joining. I do want to put a little plug in for our podcast. We have recently converted these conversations to your favorite podcast platform. So you can find us there as well now. We're super excited about that. And with that, let's get started. So Talon, I would love to introduce our amazing partner, Talon Wadsworth. Hey, Talon.
Hi, Kristen.
Talon is part of the Adobe design team and has led numerous product design initiatives here at Adobe and has a true passion for connecting with the community. And honestly, Talon, we couldn't do this without you. Thank you.
Well, I just feel, every day I feel grateful and privileged to be a part of this project with you, Kristen. Again, there's nothing more I like than talking shop with other creatives and learning from them and really just getting into it. So my pleasure.
We appreciate you so much. And with that, let's bring on our guest today. We have the honor of speaking with David Sheldon-Hicks, who leads, hey, David.
Hello.
David leads an incredible agency out of London, England, Territory Studios, a multidisciplinary studio dedicated to bringing the world's most progressive storytelling to life. And he is going to get into that and more today in the conversation with Talon. So thank you, David, for being here with us.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For those of you joining us live, please do drop questions into the LinkedIn chat. I will be joining you there in just a moment. And we will do our best to surface as many of those as possible for Talon and David today. And I'm going to step off camera and see you guys there. And David and Talon, have a great conversation.
Cool. Thank you.
David, it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And so I'm in my dark room here in London. It's essentially an edit suite. I've looked at both yours and Kristen's beautiful, bright backgrounds with a lot of jealousy. But for anyone that knows me and my meeting room, I thought I have to do it from here, along with any vitamin D spray that I have to have because I work in this. But yeah,
it's very atmospheric. It's very atmospheric, we'll say.
It makes me feel like I work in the film industry.
There you go. I think you do, right, in a way. So we'll get to that. David, why don't you kind of set the stage for us? Tell us a little bit about kind of your creative journey. I always like, kind of seeing where people come from, because, to be honest, I actually didn't know that the job I do today was something I could do, when I was in school and kind of in my formative years, right? And so I always love hearing, how did you, tell us about you, tell us about your creative journey, kind of introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, so maybe I'm a product of my age as well. I think about that quite a bit at the moment. So born in 1979, kind of growing up with amazing film and entertainment, things like, movies like Flight of the Navigator, The Goonies, Star Wars, just all those incredible, and at that age, just sparking a kid's imagination around how do I make stuff like that? That was magical. And but growing up in the UK, I guess you don't really think that you can work on movies. It doesn't feature in mine. But then also there were places like Aardman Animation that were starting to get really well known for clay animation, all that kind of stuff. And there's some wonderful TV channels in the UK that are very good late at night at broadcasting the making ofs. So I would see things like Industrial Light and Magic and how they worked on Star Wars or Indiana Jones. And then I'd be watching things like the making of Wallace and Gromit with Aardman Animation. And I was just constantly feeding that kind of passion and desire to be using creativity to tell stories is probably the best way to describe it. And I didn't really discover graphic design until much later on in life. And then when I did, it kind of clicked, because I've always been a bit of a kind of equal left brain, right brain sort of person. I love technology and science and logic, but I have to make something from nothing. And I probably came really, really close to, doing stuff in code and things like that. But for some reason, working on a Commodore 64, that almost kind of destroyed my one desire to get into code. But I still really admire people that create things from scratch in code. That is a creative endeavor. So anyway, equally left brain, right brain, went on to discover graphic design kind of through college years. And then really, before motion graphics was a term, I'm quite old, mid-40s, at the time of graduating, I just knew I needed to do animation. I loved animation, but I knew that my area of expertise was graphic design. So I just kind of combined those two things, and went on to work on music videos, and worked at some digital agencies, places like AKQA very early on in when they were on German Street, and so got to see the real kind of .com bubble and burst, and like all the things that kind of come out of that. And then through really the music industry being somewhat challenged by economics, really, I could see that music videos weren't getting the budgets that they wanted. And so I always knew I wanted to get into film, and how do I use graphics to somehow get into film? And managed somehow to get onto a movie called Casino Royale, which was Daniel Craig's first, but it was doing computer screens. And it was doing interfaces, and I just didn't know it was a thing, but I was just going to take my opportunity to work on a feature film production. And because it was equal geekiness and equal creativity, it was just perfect for me. It was just a fit, and it was the stars aligned, I would say, in that moment. And so worked with a wonderful team on that project, then went on to freelance on a Christopher Nolan film called The Dark Knight, and worked on a number of screen displays in that movie. And then after that, just my confidence built and built, and I just started to find the thing that I wanted to do. And that was really, more broadly, it wasn't screen graphics as such at the time. It was more about just, how do I take tech, science, logic, and combine that with creativity in interesting ways. And so met my business partner a few years after that, Nick Glover, and we set up Territory Studio in 2010, just after the credit crunch. And our first project was with Electronic Arts in LA. It was an opening game cinematic. So we were telling the story of why you were playing this game, like what was the kind of the preamble. And after that, about 12 months after that, after doing various different things, graphic design, motion design, digital work, we did a really beautiful iOS app for Vogue magazine and all sorts of different things. We just got this call out of the blue from Ridley Scott's team to work on Prometheus and all the screen graphics on that film. And that really launched, I would say, our reputation and our name in that space. And we then the trajectory was incredible, working on things like Guardians of the Galaxy, and more recently things like Blade Runner and Dune, and like so the credits were amazing. And from that, we've had to learn how to build teams. We've had to learn how to diversify, because the film industry sometimes strikes, as you might be aware of, or we have a pandemic, so we've learned to diversify our offering. And you think about, well, how on earth can you take such a niche of computer displays on film sets to tell stories? How does that become more broadly appealing? Like, are you just going to work on films? And of course, we've been working on computer games since day one. We'd always been working with brands, but we wanted to think about some other kind of core specialisms. And really, some of those things have turned into the future of automotive. So working with people like Porsche, Audi, General Motors on the next generation of in-car digital experience. And fine-tuning our kind of real heavy UX credentials and chops. or it might be looking at immersive and thinking about immersive, or it could be live experiences. So we always try and go for deep expertise and then think about how that can be sideways applicable to other industries and other sectors. So yeah, it's been a really exciting journey. I mean, the biggest thing for me is, and I was talking to somebody else about this earlier at lunch, it's one thing being a designer, it's another thing becoming a creative director, and it's a completely other thing like running a company.
I bet.
And what qualifies you for that? Well, actually, none of, in some ways, none of those things, in some ways, all of those things. But it's been a really, really fun time in terms of learning a lot about myself and then learning how to build these things out.
Yeah. I love that. And I want to get back to, we'll put a pin in that. I want to get back to, I think, designing a company. You're designing an agency, designing a team. I think it's a really rich topic. I want to put a pin in that for a second. But I want to go back because you mentioned so many amazing touchstones, and my eyes are just like lighting up, with excitement, because you mentioned things like Goonies. You mentioned a lot of those formative kind of like Star Wars and these other sort of formative films that I share that experience with you. And I think it was something really interesting you were saying about storytelling, and oftentimes, as a viewer, of these amazing sort of films, these cultural touchstones, just the army of craftspeople, of talented craftspeople that are bringing their skills to bear in service of this larger narrative, this larger story. And maybe talk to yourself. Let me just go a little bit deeper in terms of that kind of insight, especially when it comes to like these digital experiences, because you and I also, I think, share that the coming of age in an age of the web, of interactivity, of the explosion of computer interfaces. And right, like in the 1970s with things like Star Wars, in the 80s, like with Blade Runner, like we were seeing in front of us experiences that we couldn't have imagined even like the year before those films came out, right? So maybe just dig a little deeper in that, in terms of like the impact it had in understanding that like there were people who were imagining these futures, and maybe like how that inspired you, in your early work.
Yeah. So, well, I think what happened to me in like watching those 80s films is all of this, the science fiction of it, or even the kind of the world building of it, had a lot of spirit. It had a lot of character. Like I felt something. Okay, when we talk about AI now, I think we have a particular impression. You might go to Terminator, but I think about R2-D2 and C-3PO. They're quite warm, charming characters. Like you have a sense of warmth towards that, and I think. So one of the things that I've learned from the brand world that I always do with the film world is the brand world essentially wants to, like, why? What's the you're a purpose-driven business? What is your why? Simon Sinek, all that great stuff. So I flip that onto the film world, and I want to know the film director's reason why. Why you did, like, this is going to take 3 years of your life, and you are going to work harder than you've ever worked, and so are we all in that journey. But I think it's important, especially for anyone that's kind of heading up a team on a film production. It's like, genuinely, why do you want to invest all this money, this time, this energy into making this film? What is your point? And there will always be an underlying theme. And it was interesting when we were talking about Blade Runner 2049 and Denis and Ridley kind of before, they're not making a comment on future. They're making a comment on what it means to be human. Yeah. So this is what artificial life is about. As soon as you kind of get into the discussion around, well, this is the benefit of AI, this is the benefit of artificial intelligence, you very quickly get to, so what's my value? And what does it mean to be human? And you kind of start to ask some really interesting questions. So it's always, if you can understand the why, if you can get behind the purpose of the movie. The Martian's a great example. I think Ridley really wanted to just talk about that isolation and that human struggle, and the value of a life. And so if you can get kind of down to the human truth, and I think that's for everything that we do, getting to the core of the human truth in it all, you know, and you know, which is really interesting with AI as technology right now, or a digital experience on a phone, or a movie or a computer game. If like, what is the core of the human experience here? What is the key truth that makes everyone care? Why do we care? So I think it threads through everything, and I felt really close in the 80s to understanding the why. It kind of really was at the surface. It's like, I'm excited by making. I'm excited by changing something for it to be better and us to feel something. But I think at moments over time in media and in technology, we lose a sense of that. We lose a sense of that emotional connection, and sometimes it's in the pursuit of the perfection of utility, and that sometimes strips away the kind of the core emotional reason for doing it. And I think you can do more to surface that. So that's kind of where it comes from. And I do think that I'm a product of my time. I think I still think about technology as more than utility. It's a connection to the physical world, and it's an extension of us. And if it's an extension and an expression of us, then it needs to be more than functional. It can be more than functional.
Yeah. That is such an important context, and I love the way that you stated that, where in the context of the UI or the technology is in service of a larger story, and that larger story is meant to tell us something about ourselves, right? To really interrogate. And I love that you actually brought up characters in the form of R2D2 and C3PO, right? These are pieces of technology, ultimately, but they're resonant characters, that speak of our, think of the relationships of, R2 and Luke, throughout the films, right? Like, they're inseparable, that piece of technology and that human, they are a team, right? And one is enabled to do something that the other can't, together they can achieve this thing. And let's dig a little deeper on that, because I think there is something about, I live here in the Bay Area, I'm surrounded by tech, and right, it's technology in service of something else. And I know that I think it was in the last 10 years that you set up shop here in San Francisco.
Yeah. I don't think they're quite 10 years, but yeah.
So tell me about how you kind of approach. Again, this is a very different application of technology, here in the Bay Area, in service of other things. So tell us why you wanted to come out here to San Francisco and maybe bring some of that methodology to your work here, your potential work here, I should say.
Yeah, so culture is important, isn't it? Let's be honest. We've historically been a UK studio that serviced a lot of American clients, whether that's Hollywood or Silicon Valley, or and far further afield. Kind of we try and be global because we're really interested in a lot of different things, which is sometimes my fault, depending on which way you look at it. And San Francisco, we had an amazing kind of hackathon workshop over there, however long ago it was now, myself, Nick and Marty. And it just, like, the cultural thread of San Francisco plus territory just made a lot of sense. It just, and if you think about Apple or Pixar or kind of Adobe, like this wonderful melting pot of creativity and tech, and just that kind of pioneering spirit, which definitely felt in line with the London office's almost kind of mad inventor-esque kind of approach to things, like just breaking stuff to see what would happen was often what was going on here. So we felt like there was a place with a kindred spirit, and it just kind of added up. And personal circumstances for Marty, who was setting up the office there, and the other people we were meeting, I would just say that, like, the stars aligned, and we were brave enough to just try it, just give it a go, and we really never look back. Like, the growth that studio's seen, the talent that we've attracted, people are just wonderful. And it's an exciting place to be. It really goes through seasons, doesn't it? It kind of, you see mindset shifts, and I can go back every 6 months and it's completely changed again. And we're just part of a lot of very exciting projects that I probably can't talk about on this live.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, and kind of on that, like in exploring these opportunities, there's a bit of translation, right, of skill sets, right, where you're taking the work that you've done, like you said, we were just talking about, in service of storytelling, in a narrative, sort of setting, whether that be film, TV, even video games. So how do you think about the translation of the work that you do in those narrative environments, like into a real world setting, and maybe an application for maybe some of those places maybe we can't mention by name, but some of those clients we can't mention by name, but like talk just kind of broadly about like how you think about the translation of those skills and what you feel like you can bring to the table when it comes to working with some of these Bay Area tech firms, and the work that they're doing, and how
so we can talk about some we can definitely talk about some brands that we've worked with there or historically worked with there. The wonderful thing about the Bay Area is that they're always thinking about what's next. They're years out, always years out. And in some ways, it's quite hard to invent things in films that feel like they're not going to be around the corner anytime soon. But that is becoming a struggle. The time horizon, especially now with AI and the kind of the acceleration of all of that, actually coming up with something that feels way off is becoming minimized to quite a degree. So I would say that it's actually in some ways our blinkeredness to what is actually technically possible right now that is quite useful. We can ask a series of dumb questions, because where we're coming from, again, it kind of goes back to that kind of human truth. So what do you want people to feel? What do you want them to achieve? Okay, well, therefore, the most effective and honest way to do that in a kind of efficient storytelling way would be to do this. And then you play that out, you design it, you animate it, you show it to people, and they go, okay. And because I would say one of the skill sets in film is just telling a story in a 3-second beat. But that's become very relevant to mobile. Like with the most efficiency, the most impact, how do you really convey something super effectively in such a, it's been and it's gone. A lot of the time when we're designing elements for films, they need to feel super sophisticated. But, when we're talking with Stephen on Ready Player One, like, how is this driving the story forward? You do the visual design, you make it look beautiful, but just help me understand how this particular element is moving the story forward. And if you play that out with brands, it's like, what is this doing here? How is this helping? How is it moving the user experience forward? So very similar. It's very similar mindset. And you're doing that in a kind of advanced design project or a kind of a prototype, an MVP, just to kind of get consensus around a table. And this could be at C-suite level. We could be designing and animating super quick, super fast, to put it in front of people to help them make decisions, to help them move the dial forward. So that happens a lot. We are using design and animation in a digital sense to show what could be, without worrying about how the technology kind of gets there. And that is typical of how we work in film. We're not thinking, well, can IBM build this thing? Like, is that, can we have a walking robot? Can we have an R2D2? We're really thinking about what is it that we want for the consumer or the audience here, and working back from there. So it's very, in some ways, the execution is really pure. Then comes all the nuance of business models and consumer insights and everything else that kind of layers into that. But as a kind of using a visual device to ask a question, I think that's essentially what we're doing in movies. It's essentially what we're doing in games and what we do for like innovation brands.
Yeah. I don't, thank you so much for that. I think that's so, just the nuanced way in which you're sort of applying those skills, like I said, like from a storytelling perspective, and saying there's a human is going to be looking at this thing, and what do they need to understand about this experience, this narrative, the and that can be a number of messages that are trying to come across in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that flies in the face of the way I would say a lot of UX design is approached, but there are some tensions there. Maybe like, what are some of those tensions, contradictions? Have you run into any of those in terms of interfacing with these clients out here in the Bay Area?
I would say there are tensions or contradictions, but I think there's an assumption sometimes that if something looks beautiful, it might not also function really well. And I would say that if you can make something visually appealing, you're more likely to get somebody to use it. So you want the experience to be pleasing the whole way through. And so I think sometimes adding a level of craft, adding a level of visual sophistication, and maybe thinking about how it dials into culture. I think modernism is kind of boxing itself into a corner if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And so there is opportunities here and there, more than we give ourselves license to be expressive in the digital space. And just like, and everyone talks about moments of joy and moments of fun. I just don't see that coming through. Yeah. And I think there's still opportunities to do that. What excites me about AI is that it's just opening up all of those opportunities in more.
Yeah.
And so I think that the technology will kind of open up those boundaries a little bit more for us, and we can play in a bigger sandpit.
That's a really, I think, great observation, because I think the limitation in terms of executing on the vision around an experience, a UI, really comes down to time and human resources to be able to execute on that. And I think your observation saying, well, how does AI actually open that up? And I've been tracking a lot of the innovations of how developers, engineers are utilizing AI to speed up their process, right? They're accelerating, so their capacity alongside of partnering with AI might actually open up, as you're saying, like new opportunities to be expressive, because there has been a real flattening of UI digital experiences in service of these efficiencies, right? To get design systems, right? Like code frameworks, right? These are all a move towards efficiency, and maybe we've lost some of that expressiveness.
I would agree, and it's tricky because I'm coming at a very particular angle. I love that the big tech companies are essentially wanting to democratize technology and ensure that it can get out to absolutely everyone with zero latency. I think that is a worthwhile. I'm not kind of challenging. I'm not challenging that, but I do think it sacrifices things around the fringes that could kind of come through in that. It kind of goes. I get told off for kind of looking at Blade Runner too often, but it's a useful shorthand, so forgive me. With Blade Runner, in having replicants, you kind of ask, okay, so what's the important roles that humans need to have here? And I think everyone's worried about getting replaced by AI, which is not going to happen. But if you think about, okay, well, when I think about AI-enabled After Effects, if I don't have to roto, if I don't need to cut something out, or if it doesn't take too long for me to do the task that I really don't want to do, how much time does that free up for me or my team to kind of like really look at the subjective stuff that dials into culture, that speaks to an audience, that makes them feel something? Like I can't rely on generative or AI to kind of make the emotional connection, to make it feel like real and have a differential to other brands. Like if we're all using AI and we're all using the same software, then like you still need something injected in there to kind of give you that differential, and that's still design and creativity in my mind. So my sense is what we're seeing is efficiency pulling away some of the stuff that we don't want to be doing, and freeing up time to do the stuff that we really want to do. That's a really weird way of connecting generative AI to Blade Runner and replicants. So that's quite.
I think it's a useful analogy. I think you're asking or framing the question in the right way, which is what is in doing this and creating this, what is the role of it, and how does it play alongside of us? And I liked how you brought the artist or the creative into this, because there was a question from Ankit in the chat, and I think you were speaking to it. Will AI replace FX simulations or the FX artist? And I think you were pointing at the sort of the role of the creative, getting up and out of those production heavy processes, and then now focusing on the context, the sort of intent, right, of that visual effects, of that UI component, of that sort of end-to-end experience, right? Like the important voice of the human, the creator in that, is to employ now UI experience, device, sort of imagined device, like, and really placing it in context with intent, right? And maybe that's really now like the evolution that we all need to make, and we're able to make now, because all those low-lying processes are just taken out of the equation for us. By AI.
No, I agree. I mean, to answer that question, I'm not worried. No, in the same way that I never thought that CGI would replace photography, and so. But I think the space becomes more fragmented. I think that mediums that otherwise wouldn't have received visual effects now receive visual effects through AI. Mm-hmm. So I probably wouldn't think about, having visual effects in user-generated content, but you could now. But does that mean that there's going to be visual effects artists not working on feature films? No, that would be painful. Honestly, it would be so painful. Just the thing about making a movie is everything is intentional, and when you have to surface the right amount of control to give that intentionality to it. Everything is a handshake from one shot or one moment to the next. So you can't use it in that. You can't think about it in that way. But it is a wonderful. What's the best way of describing it? AI is almost a wonderful foil. Oh, okay, it can do that, so I need to do this. It's a great bounce point. I find in the way that I'm working, the way that I'm working with it. Really, for me, I think we're asking the wrong questions. Like the interesting question isn't will AI replace a visual effects artist? It's more, what new opportunities is it going to open up? So if we're doing Iron Man's heads-up display, so much of that story-driven stuff that's going on in front of Robert Downey Jr.'s face is all in English. So if you're a foreign language audience and you're watching that movie, you're kind of reading the subtitles and then you're looking at the graphics and you're kind of jumping around all over the place. And really, it would be so much better to localize that for all the different audiences. That would be, in my mind, far more democratic. It would be the right thing to do. But the cost associated with that is just off the charts. Yeah. If we can feed some of this stuff into, like, we create the original, but then it gets localized for Japanese and other markets. For me, that's like more purely bringing our work to a lot of other people. So it's those sorts of things. I think that we need to stop worrying about what it's going to do, and more in terms of what's it going to create. I'm really excited by digital characters, like the idea of designing my own illustrated character that I can have a conversation with. Like, that is just that's so exciting. We've never had that. We've never had that. Or the idea that I can use AI to start to create some of my own micro tools, like and like mini efficiencies within like the Adobe suite. Can I don't have to learn Python. Can I use AI to help me kind of create some of those tools within the overall ecosystem, and then like share that? Like that's incredible. So I think it's more about what is the tooling it's going to create for us that we didn't know that we needed or wanted, but it actually moves our on. It's like let's focus on what we needed to do, and kind of go from there. Not let the technology drive the experience.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And just to put a little bit, I mean, we're sort of casting ahead a little bit, but maybe for everybody in the audience, what are some specific things that you and the team are doing, today with AI, with AI tools? Again, generative or otherwise. Have you found a role for it in your workflow, today, where it's giving you enough kind of information?
I suspect it's sprinkled through everything. And if I speak to different artists in the studio and designers in the studio, some of them will say nothing, and they're lying. They just don't realize. Others will say, "Oh, I'm using it for so much," and normally it's a blend of like those two poles. I think what's been fascinating for me, and I try not to talk without giving too much away. What's interesting is you're starting to understand. Computer visioning is really interesting. And so the way in which AI reads video footage, understands video footage, and the intelligence that you can pull from that. So for instance, like, give me all the shots where a human appears in the movie. Like, I just quickly give me an edit and just isolate all the shots where people, and then give me all the shots where they're in an Iron Man suit, just things like that. But like push that on. So we can now pull three-dimensional data from archival footage that never existed. Like, it's not there, but through Gaussian splatting or through other kind of LLM type technologies, you can suddenly re-look at archival footage and re-represent it in fresh new ways. Now that's exciting. If you're a documentary filmmaker, or even anyone that's dealing with archival material, so like a media company, news outlets, anyone that's dealing with like sports, like looking at the archival of sports, anyone that's like a brand. If you think most brands, if they're like 100 years old, they've got a wealth of material that most people don't know anything about. And if you can have access to all of that data, synthesize it and play it back in interesting ways, like just the onboarding experience for new employees, it just radically changes. So I think at the moment we're all looking at generative, and that is fine, and that's a piece of this overall thing. But there's so much other stuff in there, and I think for me it's about pulling intelligence from material that's out there and then reinterpreting it in new ways. And that is the creative process. We don't originate everything in a vacuum. We are influenced and referencing other things. And I think this technology really helps us to synthesize materials in really interesting ways and re-represent in new and fresh ways. And that's what we should be jumping into. And that's what we're doing here as a studio in terms of R&D projects, in terms of live productions. And like I said, I was chatting to an exec producer, similar kind of discussion panel, a chap called Robbie, and he execs a lot of different film productions, and he was very pro kind of Gen AI from a copy perspective, and he was saying, I'm not letting it create any of my scripts or any of my writing. I'm having a conversation to kind of bounce ideas, because I don't have a friend with encyclopedic knowledge of all of this stuff. If I can bounce a conversation with this thing, it creates new questions in me and it moves my ideas forward. And I think that's where a lot of us are kind of like finding the interesting opportunities with, all of the different engines. It's like, how does it move your own ideas forward? That's kind of interesting, because we all talk about fail fast, right? And I think some of this these new tools coming through just help you fail fast in different ways and kind of move your ideas forward and move your craft forward, which is really, really valid.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, that's definitely where I find some of the biggest application, today for myself, for my own workflows, is the ability to try out a lot of things and kind of work through problems in real time, rather than having this, then it's kind of this lag time that shows up, like in all the invisible work that happens, as a creative, and just communicating and iterating. Right, the faster I can iterate to the next one, and the next one, and the next one after that, like the better each of those iterations is going to be in that full cycle of a creative process. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that. There was, one thing that might be kind of good here, again, as we're sort of talking kind of more broadly about the team. Tell us about, Territory Studio and designing, a business, designing an agency, designing a team. Tell us a little bit about the makeup of the team, kind of, how big is it? Where are your offices? We touched a little bit about that, but maybe talk about some of the like how has it grown, and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, it's funny. So I was literally in a presentation a little moment ago where we were running through our timeline. I've got a really nice keynote presentation I can present to you at some point. So it started in 2010. The London office has grown to just under 100 people, and a lot more with freelance. And we've got different teams within the space. So we've got a creative advertising team that do a lot of the kind of the marketing campaign work and the creative strategy for people like Netflix and Apple and Amazon and Disney. So very much on the marketing side for the entertainment industry. We have a very strong motion graphics background, and we kind of apply that across lots of different things. That might be title sequences for a film. Heavily Adobe in terms of our backbone software infrastructure. And then we go all out visual effects, and we've got compositors and CG artists. The creative tech team is working in real time, working in AI, working in other digital technologies, React, and all sorts of other coding languages. And then we've got the kind of the UX and our digital team from a kind of front end visual design experience and UX. And I've probably left somebody out, and I'm going to feel really, really bad about that. So I'm trying to make sure I've covered everyone. But they're kind of like the core teams. And then there's a lot of bleed. There's a lot of bleed in that. So if you think about virtual production, we've done a number of virtual production projects. Our first one was with David Fincher on Mank. And you're really bleeding between our creative tech team, so kind of using a real-time engine. And we've been using real-time engine since forever because we've been working in the games industry. So blending real-time engine skill sets with visual effects skill sets, and a really nice overlap there. Same on the kind of the digital experience side on for the automotive industry. We'll be taking like some of our motion team, and they might be creating the front end like brand experience. And then that kind of then dissolves into full-blown UX, central cluster and all those sorts of things. So we love that hybridized, the opportunity for teams to blend over and partner is really, really cool. And I would say San Francisco office have done that as well. And we've got Cantina, who joined our group, Territory Group, 2 years ago now. They're based in LA, wonderful team, do a lot of the kind of Marvel work. They worked on the Avatar films. More recently, we worked on Deadpool, and then we've got Lord of the Rings TV series coming out with them. Sorry, credit drop. They're a hybrid of this kind of motion design, visual effects aspect. So they're the kind of the core teams. So London, San Francisco, LA. We've also got a new office in Canada, in Vancouver, and we've also got a small office in Barcelona. And location is important to us. Like places make us. We very specifically are in Clerkenwell in London. And what's interesting about Clerkenwell is it's not filled with Shoreditch. Typically, I would say are the digital agencies. You kind of get a lot of the digital agencies there. And then Soho would be where all the visual effects studios. But actually, Clerkenwell is more a hub for architects and industrial designers. And it's a really interesting mix. So we like being here. We feel a part of that. And I've always had an interest in architecture because, again, it's logic and creativity kind of coming together. So in London, that's become part of our kind of cultural DNA. And then in San Francisco, we're also kind of like really thinking about where we are. And they've recently moved into a beautiful office, kind of ex-architects studio, worth a visit if you're in the Bay Area. And so so team culture really important to us. We always want to balance design, storytelling, and technology wherever we can. Like it's at the core. And we see that thread as world building. That might be world building for brands. It might be world building for technologies or games and films. But that feels like a skill set. It feels like an approach to a project. Looking at the holistic and then going into the details. Like, what is the overall? If we're working with somebody like Patrice on Dune, he will be helping us understand the overall rules of it all. So this is the logic. This is the foundational logic of each planet. These are the cultures that sit within that. So when you're designing your little graphic here, it's all coming from this broader culture. And when you're designing for technology or you're designing for brands or you're future mapping and looking at future cones, it's all broader context and then thinking about how that dilutes down into specific moments. So it's a really worthwhile exercise for us. So you go world building and overall kind of like mapping of the rules. Then you think about human narratives, you think about human behaviors, and then you kind of get down into the specifics of the design. And if you can work through that layered logic, you get something that is kind of coming from that core truth up there. And so we find that as an approach to both designing for a car, designing for a tech brand, or designing for a feature film director is a way of us knowing how to like work through that logic and give the work meaning. Because a film director, a game director, a head of innovation at a brand, they all want to know that it's well considered and that it will work for as many people as possible. Like it will truly connect with a broad audience. It's or a very specific audience, but it needs to mean something. So that's why we take that approach. It's just it's just our lens for working on things. And then wherever we can, we try and support everyone with technology, like just making sure the tools get out of the way of the process. We've got an amazing systems team here. We've got a great pipeline team, and as and when building out our own proprietary software, because you just have to. For me, when I was an After Effects designer, or even in Photoshop and Illustrator, you kind of just have to get through that learning all the shortcuts, because I don't want to be restricted by. I don't want the tools to get in my way. I want to think about what's the end result that I want to get to, not how do I make that end result. I just need to. It needs to flow, and that people talk about the state of flow. That is so true. It's like I just need to lose myself in this, and if I can lose myself in it because the tools are melting away, then I can focus on what's important.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I think one of the things I've really enjoyed about being at Adobe is I have no patience for tools, and I've been able to you constantly feel whenever those dialogues or series of dialogues or a series of drop downs is getting in my way, and standing in the way of the design of the the overall outcome. And when I was leading XD, one of our mantras was design at the speed of thought. That we wanted the tool that recognized that the human really didn't need to have all these things, all these options and variables that make you make these little micro decisions that are just chipping away at your flow as you're sort of stating it. So it really resonates with me, I think, what you're saying there. So
it's also knowing when to be quiet and to just kind of sit with something and be intentional. One of the big things I learned from film directors, which has maybe influenced the way in which I've built this company, has probably been more heavily influenced by film directors than I realized looking back. So one of the things that Ridley taught me was, before you start making something, think about where you're going. Like, where are you now? Where are you headed? And kind of get there. And he was really just teaching everyone his own mindset, which is, to be a director, you need it all mapped out up here. And he would literally be able to sketch out anything in the film. He would be able to tell you immediately what it needed to be. It was all in there. And not only the film that he was working on right now, but the other two in the future were all up in his head. And I think that's a great thing for like budding creatives, is just take 10 minutes before you boot up or whatever it is, and just think, I'm here today, where do I want to be by the end of it, and how do I get there? Because being super focused on that direction, or maybe it's, you know what, I'm going to spend half of the day just playing around and discovering, but I need to be here by the end of it. And the reason that I know that works is whenever your computer crashes and you lose everything that you've done, to redo that work takes you about 10 minutes, but it took you 3 hours to get there. Mm-hmm. And so I know, so that logic does hold up. I promise. But please don't make your computer crash. That's not good.
No, okay, we're good. Hopefully, yes, the computer won't crash. But yeah, I second that. So I think exactly, which is all the great sort of directors, creative directors, like people that have a vision of where they're going, right? It means that they're doing everything they're doing in the lead up to that is done in this intentional way, right? And the overall context that they've set informs everything up and down the chain, from the biggest, widest shot to the smallest little detail, right? Because there's that intent and the context they're setting and the vision that they have, that means that all these things are reinforcing and leaving, and then the user or the viewer, with the overall impression and hopefully that connection that they're looking to make.
So to go full circle on your original question around, but so designers in some ways are perfect candidates for building their own businesses, because you need to think intentionally about where are you taking people. So a film director has a script, and they're using that to help hundreds of people understand where they're all going, their reason why, and then how you all need to put all of your energy into helping me make this thing. So you need to motivate a lot of people to do what you believe in. So you have to have a really good why, obviously, kind of stating the obvious for a lot of people here. And then it's about kind of keeping that energy up and that focus and constantly reminding people of the vision. So as long as you have the tools in place to kind of, now, honestly, I'm like the plumber. I'm good at doing this for everyone else and bad at doing it for myself. So everyone in the studio here is probably rolling their eyes right now, like, when did you do that, David? But I try to seed it in. I think I seep it in. I'll allow myself that. But so I think the bit that I've had to learn, managing people isn't always, I suspect I'm slightly autistic, and so managing people isn't always natural to me, and I have to say a lot more things out loud that I think that I say in my head, and actually I haven't said out loud to people, and I have to check myself on that. So that's been kind of interesting learning for me. And then the other one, which you just can't shy away from, is commercials. Like, if you want to do great work, it has to pay money. It has, and there's no point in, I think we all tell ourselves as creators, I'm not good at structure and I'm not good at this. It's all nonsense. It's just stories that we tell ourselves because we are all a little bit apologetic for picking something that we love to do. I honestly think that we could be far better in business by being honest with ourselves. And actually, some of the best entrepreneurs out there, if you think about Steve Jobs and all that, did you do a course in typography? Like design is genuinely, creativity and design is genuinely such a useful tool, because you're thinking about communication and how it resonates with everyone, and you're thinking about how an idea translates for a lot of people and how that has meaning for a lot of people. So actually, creatives should be excellent. But the bit that we kind of then tell ourselves is, I can't have a strong conversation in a board meeting around finance. Like, you just have to educate yourself. You just have to learn it. And so that's the bit that I've learned, is that legals are important, financials are important, project management is insanely important, IT is important. Like, all of this great creativity doesn't help with all of those other teams being the top of their game. So and it's a shame, because on the film credits, you kind of see the credits roll and you think, can we not get the finance team in there? Can we not get, it's just, it's such a team sport, all of this stuff.
Yeah, it is.
And if you don't get those other things right, you just don't realize how much that messes with the creativity of it all. I think us having a strong strategy and understanding business operations, all that other kind of grown-up stuff, or just like we owe it to this industry to like run our businesses properly and do a really good job. And I get it wrong. Like I definitely got it wrong, and I try and learn from that all the time. Definitely, and listening to other people when they know better or have better ideas. It's like, but I think a lot of that I've learned from I've also learned some really unhealthy habits from the film industry, but there's been some really useful ones in there, and I've also learned a lot from games and automotive and tech as well. I think we're listening a lot is useful, which is ironic because I'm talking a lot at the moment.
No, it's I mean, again, it's been such a pleasure to sort of like, I think, just go on this journey with you and dig into these deep topics. And again, I think that I really appreciate the ways in which, again, you're kind of referencing that thing that we noted at the start, which is that awareness of, all the craftsmen and the people who are doing their jobs to execute, on these larger narratives, and to bring it all together and to make it impactful, and to bring, to really in all their work, like bring forward the elements that we can connect to, as humans, here in all of this. And again, David, we could go for much longer, but unfortunately we have to end it there. David, just thank you so much for, again, your insights and just your generosity in sharing from your experience, and continuing to look for great things from you in the studio. Thank you so much.
Complete pleasure. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you so much, David. We really appreciate it. I think the audience was mesmerized. So
great. Love it.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you. And thank you, Talon, again, for always just leading such amazing conversations for our community. We really appreciate it. Thanks. And thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you being a part of the conversation as well through our chat. And as a reminder, we have recently launched a podcast. So for those of you who maybe missed the intro, we are converting our conversations here from SoDA Series Live into 30-minute podcast editions. So you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. And we will be taking a short break next month. We will not be hosting a September live, but we will be back with you in October. So October 31st, Halloween. That's our current date scheduled. So hopefully we'll see you all back then. Thank you, everyone, for joining.